powerful is the Cox network. So powerful that one day, the internet will let your doctor perform miracles from thousands of miles away.
Connecting to remote operating room.
Giving a whole new meaning to the term house call.
Operation complete.
The Cox network. With gig speeds everywhere, it's internet built for tomorrow, today. Cox, bringing us closer. In Cox serviceable areas, speeds vary and are not guaranteed. Cox terms apply. Other restrictions may apply.
From hook and bullet to policy and science, we're here to discuss and dissect all matters of importance to Montana's rugged landscape and the people and wildlife that call it home. This is Montana Untamed. So obviously we're here to talk about the federal duck stamp competition, but let's start with just kind of introduce yourself.
Well, my name's Chuck Black, and I'm originally from Minnesota.
Okay.
And I went to North Dakota, where I studied wildlife biology and got my degree in wildlife. And growing up, being in the outdoors, my family was a big outdoors family, and so they had me out in the duck blind when I was a kid, and that's when
North Dakota, Minnesota, that's big duck country.
Yeah, and so that's where I was really introduced to like the stamp and what it does for conservation. And the artwork, of course.
Right.
And so, I was just fascinated by all that stuff when I was a kid, and it was everywhere, know, especially in Minnesota. And then I really took to drawing, and for me it was, when I was outside, it was always, how can I recreate that on paper when I get home? And in school, it was just one of those things where I was just, if I wasn't outdoors, I wanted to be doing something that kind of like brought my mindset back in the outdoors. And so drawing and painting, that really kind of just like became a big passion of mine.
So you went to school for wildlife biology?
Yep. And I ended up working for national parks, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, some state wildlife agencies. I worked for Montana FWP, and that's really that was back in 2011. That was the first summer that I kind of experienced living out here.
Okay.
And that's probably, like why I wanted to come back eventually. But I did the seasonal gig as a wildlife tech for 6 or 7 years at Theodore Roosevelt, Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Colorado Fish and Wildlife, Minnesota DNR, and like I said, the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is also in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And when I worked in Minnesota for the Fish and Wildlife Service, I worked actually for the Partners Program, which is the largest program that uses duck stamp dollars. And they use it to buy the rights, easements on private land, and then restore that water, put that water back on the landscape.
Right.
And so working in that program, that's when my appreciation and my passion for like the duck stamp and what it can do really skyrocketed, and that's where my interest, I feel like, really peaked. So
the work that you were doing for these, various game agencies and federal agencies, was it bird work or was it big game work?
It was all the above, yeah. Okay. So in Montana, it was for the Sage Grouse Project out of Roundup.
Oh, perfect, okay.
Yep. And then, I did elk management, deer management, mule deer in Colorado, and just general. A lot of times it's just whatever is needed as a wildlife tech. They kind of just assign you to things. So,
and that was my guess. That was seasonal work.
Mm-hmm.
You were kind of going from one season to, and does that kind of explain why you're kind of all over the place?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and when I went to school for wildlife, that was when my passion at the same time for art started to. At least I started to get recognized amongst other people, like, hey, could I buy some of this? Or I started getting people to follow my work. And I thought
so the art was kind of just happening.
Back in college. And so I'd actually thought about majoring in art. But then, back then that was 2007, and it's just there was no social media or internet, and it's like, well, how do you do that? And like maybe
content didn't exist.
Yeah, and so I was like, well, maybe I need to just find something that complements that well. And so if I could be, I thought, a wildlife biologist, it'd be just kind of like a great win-win. I could be working in and around the subject matter I love,
right,
and then have But the seasonal work was great, and I stuck with it for so long because it allowed me to work for 4 to 6 months, and then I'd have a couple months break before my next gig, and that is when I really drew and paint and practice.
So hold on, rewind a little bit. Where did this artistic bug come from? Was this something that you kind of carried with you from childhood, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my mom has a folder from when I was 2 of just pieces of artwork that I did, from finger paintings all the way on. And I don't know. It was just something that in school I was not taking notes. I was drawing caricatures of the teachers and things like that.
Okay.
And,
so you've always had that going in the back of your mind. And then, so it sounds like the seasonal work, you ended up with this time off. Mm-hmm. And then that's where you really like honed your skills, would you say?
Yep. And then I started to find maybe like a collector base, and some people started buying multiple drawings and paintings I would do, and it got to the point. So I won the Colorado duck stamp, and then that was in 2013, and then I won the California duck stamp in 2015. Okay. And then in 2015,
those are state duck stamps.
Yep. And those programs actually don't exist anymore. They just ended those. So it's kind of a dying thing, and now it's just a fee, rather than the whole art programming contest.
Okay.
But yeah, and then so when I won California, that was kind of the same time when I thought, I want to give the artwork a try and just see how it goes. I had like a year's worth of savings, and so came here, and I just kind of thought, well, if I'm going to come somewhere, Bozeman's got a hot art scene, and I've seen it, and so I thought, well, maybe I could kind of work my way in and make connections, and that really didn't happen, and it's tough. But
when was this?
2015.
2015, okay.
Yep. And then that at the same time, though, was when Instagram and Facebook and everything started to grow, and then that's when eventually I was able to kind of get my base, and I've been doing it since.
So it was kind of this perfect timing where you were able to maybe market yourself using those platforms.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that was when I really saw kind of like a means to an end of how I could at least get it to the point where maybe it was sustainable.
Right. Yeah. Right. Huh. And so remind me again, why did you decide on Montana? Sounds like you've been all over the kind of the West and the Midwest.
Yeah, well, so I did, I want to say 6 different seasons at Theodore Roosevelt National Park in Medora.
Right, North Dakota.
Yep, and so, I mean, I really fell in love with the prairie and just the whole region. And then when I worked in Roundup, I lived in Billings for a year and just loved it. And so that's
similar country, Badlandy.
Yeah, and I had access to Red Lodge and all that stuff I would go do, and it was just something I really wanted to try.
Right.
And, just kind of stuck here.
So I guess maybe explain for, if you were explaining to people who don't know, what is the federal duck stamp?
Yeah, so the federal duck stamp, back in, I suppose, the early 1900s, when the ducks all waterfowl almost became extinct, and it was ding darling, and now they have a refuge for ding in Florida. He proposed the idea of a program that would require anybody that hunts ducks to purchase the stamp, and then 99 cents, or maybe even higher than that, of every dollar goes towards acquiring habitat for more ducks. And so the more duck hunters there were, the more funding there was to put water back on the land, take it out of agriculture, and start to conserve this stuff. And so that grew with time, obviously. I think now
it's a requirement for duck hunting.
Right, and they made it a requirement then. I think it was 1935, and the Senate and House, they put this in place, and it was just all about waterfowl. And then, I mean, it's become the most successful bird conservation, probably wildlife conservation in history. Yeah.
So you have this basically an art contest where the world of conservation and the world of art are like colliding every year. So can you maybe tell me where your infatuation with the federal duck stamp kind of came from? Was it when you were a kid?
Yeah, and
were you interested in it?
Like I said, when I started to see my dad with these stamps, and he would show me the art. Back then, I would get my haircut at a local shopping mall, and that was back in the early 90s when they'd have print art galleries in all the malls, and those disappeared soon thereafter. But at that time, there was these three brothers in Minnesota, the Hotman brothers, and I think collectively they've won 16 duck stamps now.
Oh, wow.
And so they started winning in the late 80s. And so as a kid, and they were referenced in the movie Fargo, the husband was a duck and duck painter, and he was always like, those dang Hotmans, So like as a kid in Minnesota, I remember I'd get my hair cut there, and then I'd get to go into the art gallery, and it would always be their paintings and the duck stamps, and they'd have framed prints of them. Right. And I just fell in love with it. I feel like, and just kind of became like an obsession since I was a kid.
So my guess is this is not the first time you've submitted an entry.
No, I still got I think it's the 9th or 10th. I believe it's the 10th. And early on, I was doing duck paintings since I was 10 probably, and really trying to improve on that. But I don't think I worked up the confidence to enter the federal contest. And I think my first entry was 2008.
You just felt like your work was not on par? Or
yeah, I mean, everything is so good. Yeah, I mean, there's 100 of them that are just, anyone could be the winner, and I'm looking at my stuff like there's just no way. And so It took me a while, and then eventually I had the confidence. And then I entered every year, I think up until 2016 or so, but that was the time when, trying to do my art full time, I started to think of like, well, what's really practical, and spending a lot of time, months on end getting reference photos and then doing the painting might not be the best use of time if I'm trying to make a career out of art, because it's, you can't depend on it or count on winning. Yeah.
Is there a payout? Is there a prize, or is it like, or do you just get the glory?
Yeah. So because it's the nature of the program, that all the money goes towards conservation. Right. So the prize is that you keep the original and retain all rights of the image. So, they prints or licensing, the reproductions is a big thing they do.
It becomes probably like the most widely advertised piece of wildlife art.
Yeah, and 2 million plus waterfowl hunters will have to have that in their pocket with your name on it, and so it's just a lot of publicity, and I've still yet to find out, but I hear that artists sell a lot of prints, right? And so all the Ducks Unlimited banquets through the country, they'll always have a duck stamp print, and as the artist, you get to keep all of that business.
So, and just a clarification, this was the 2023 contest, but it will be the 2024 stamp.
Correct.
So, for next year, that's the stamp that people will be purchasing to either support conservation or go hunting.
Yep. Okay. Yep. And I should also mention that every duck stamp, or all duck stamps, are also entrance passes into any wildlife refuge that requires a fee. So, yeah.
All right. So, your entry, tell me about it.
I
guess for those maybe listening on an audio platform, we maybe describe it first.
Yeah. So it's a single pintail drake. The contest gives you 5 eligible species every year.
Okay, because I was going to ask why you decided on a pintail.
Yep. So they tell you the species 2 to 3 years out. So I knew that the pintail was going to be eligible, and Erica and I, we drove down in 2020 in the spring to Red Rocks National Wildlife Refuge, and while we were there for a couple of days, we had noticed a single male pintail sitting on this small wetland, and every morning he'd sit there all morning until the hen would show up, which I assume was nesting nearby. And she would show up and they'd do their thing, and then they'd both leave for the day. And so on the final morning, we thought, like, well, the pintail is going to be eligible. Let's try to lay on the shore the next morning and see if he'll show back up again. And right on schedule, he plopped right in front, 10 yards out, and so I got to really observe and film and photograph him for as long as I wanted to. And it was really cool because, I mean, pintails are, like, I think a lot of the times they're a favorite bird, especially for ducks. And, I mean, same with me, but I've never really been able to, like, actually see how they behave and do their thing, especially in the spring and breeding season. So we got to watch him and listen to him whistle, and just kind of go through his whole routine, which was really cool. And so after that happened, I just knew that when it was eligible, I had to use this experience and try to come up with something.
Oh, wow. Is this typical of your process then, or was this a unique situation where you had this connection with a single?
Yeah, and I mean, with any of the artwork that I do these days, for me, that's a big deal, is trying to draw from my own experience, and come up with a story from that.
How does like having that story and those observations, and like you say, you could hear their calls. How does that lend itself to the actual, static painting?
Yeah. Say if you've got, so I really like to video my subjects, because if you've got a single image, you have the memory of it and being there, but to be able to watch something or observe something happen, it really plays into the whole process of you're working through the bill and the head and the expression that it has, and all of those things, I think help you position for this, as an example, like position the neck and the head in such a way that really captures maybe the personality, or what I would say is maybe like the coolest moment of how it behaves or positions itself, and so that I think the biggest thing with this painting was the position of the head and kind of like the look back, and that was something that I couldn't really capture in one shot, but I had different angles of it where he did do that with his head, but the body was turned differently.
Right, because he's kind of quartering away, but then there's also this element to him almost looking over his shoulder, sort of a feel. Right.
Yep. Yeah, and I thought that, for me as the artist, what I really wanted to do was just capture the attention of the viewer right away, and almost like that duck, and that's like the Mona Lisa, where she's looking at you at all times.
Right. And
I wanted that sense with the bird so it really held your attention, and and that helps it stand out amongst other ones, which it's all the paintings are very similar. So you got to figure out ways to I guess capture the judge's attention and hold it.
Right. And it's a pintail. So it's got to be kind of quartering away, because you got to see that pintail, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's a big struggle too, because they want you to capture, and they say it's judged on all of these elements. What are the most prominent features of the bird that are recognizable, and does that stand out well in the stamp size? I don't know if I can shrink that. The stamp will be small, and so... Right.
What are the other guidelines? Does it have to be on water, or can it be in flight?
Yeah, it's whatever you would like it to do. I think the only requirement is the bird has to be alive.
Right.
So...
Oh, yeah.
Because,
Can't be like hanging from a set of waders in the painting?
Okay. Right, exactly, yeah.
And so what were the other species? Did they not call out to you?
No, what were the other species? Usually it just comes down to what I have the best reference for. And obviously...
Were those other species maybe not ones that we would run into up here in Montana?
Now I'm blanking on what the other species were. There was the ringneck.
Okay.
And there was the snow goose. There's a couple others that I'm spacing. But yeah, that's a big part of it is... Oh, no, that's coming up. Oh. That's for the...
But regardless, the pintail was the one that...
Yeah, that kind of just stood out amongst the crowd.
And I think I glanced through... Boy, there's a lot of entries. I went through the Fish and Wildlife Service that hosts it?
Yep.
They had a Flickr page with all the entries on there, and I went through them. A lot of people picked the pintail.
Yeah, well, actually, I believe it was a tie between the ringneck and the pintail. There was like 50 and 52 between those two.
I guess maybe the pintail is just the one that stood out to me.
Right.
And I'm curious about the style. Is this the style... I guess I had two questions about it. it seems to me that like a lot of the winning duck stamps kind of have like a realism, like almost a hyper realism to them. Is that
full background?
Is that the same style that you paint otherwise, or was this a deviation from your norm?
It was, well, I would say I approach it in the same manner, but it is different. And the reason why is because I thought, well, if I'm going to do a pintail, that's usually everyone's favorite bird, or it's a definitely a bird that stands out. And so I thought, why not, if I'm going to do the entry, make it just about the bird and try not to have anything else that will take away from the bird itself.
Oh, interesting. And like the habitat or other environmental
right, because the pintail is so cool and so pretty that I just thought, why not just make that the highlight of the painting, and then everything else maybe complement it rather than try to distract from it anyways. Right. But and so when I did this, I thought,
because you've got some cattails in there, but it is a kind of a muted backdrop.
Yeah, and I thought, so make it just about the bird, make it a single bird, and have it be large, and then for a background, just keep it soft. And I really love to play with light in my work, and so like you'll notice behind the reeds, there's a source of light coming from there, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you really think about it, but I thought that would be kind of a good substitute for not including a really detailed background. And so I thought if I did the light and kind of have that glowing behind the bird where the reeds are, it would really pull the viewer's eye down to the bird, and then the light here would kind of draw you back across the background, and then have some complement, some similar colors as what's in the head, and really just tie it together. So that was kind of my strategy with this, is make it about the light, and then use that light to really emphasize these things on the bird. And
I think it's a natural light, especially for, I would say, duck hunters, because it's similar to the morning we had where today you've got an overcast ceiling, but there's those moments, maybe 10 minutes, where the sun is coming up. You have a really dark ceiling above you, but then the horizon is lit up.
Right.
And I guess that's
that's
right before shooting light, maybe right at shooting light.
Yeah, and that's really what I was hoping to go for. And a lot of the comments was like, it's almost like it's in a portrait studio, which I thought was interesting. But I think that, again, that my intention was, I was thinking, well, maybe it's fog behind and the light is hitting it, and so you can't really see anything behind it.
You got like a diffused light.
But a lot of people really liked it because they thought it felt like it was in like a proper portrait studio, like you had invited the duck in somewhere. And and that I think really is like what is supposed to be the ideal duck stamp painting, is something that it's like supposed to be the Ken and Barbie of that species. Like make it as perfect as you can in all the elements.
Right, the most perfect specimen.
Right. Yeah.
So it sounds like you've gotten some feedback on the painting. How can you explain where you've gotten that? Is that from the judging, or is that just from other artists?
Well, there was the live feed of the judging, and so they had a couple thousand people that were on the YouTube live watching it, and it was just all the comments coming in. It was really interesting to see every painting that would come up for the judging. You just get droves of comments about each entry.
And so you were watching this live as the judging was
and so that's what I'm referring to, is that there was 100 comments that came through and my entry came up, and it was interesting to see just random perspectives of something I thought about so much. And then just talking to everybody so far, and
And so when was the judging?
September 16th.
Okay, so earlier this month, not too long ago.
Yep.
And then did you find out live with anybody else, like
right.
the YouTube feed or what?
Yeah, so I was watching it on the computer, and there's 3 rounds of judging. The first one is in or out, basically the judges deciding whether it deserves to be voted on or not. Should it be in the contest or should it not be? And then the second round is when they vote. They hold up a card 1 to 5. And the judges are separated so they can't see what other judges are voting. and they want it to be, individual. And so they hold up 1 through 5, and after the second round, I had tied for first going into the third round with 2 others.
Okay.
So it was a 3-way tie, essentially, and then you go into the final round.
Were they all pintails?
Yeah, they were.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, and so
we have a judge favorite here. It sounds like
yeah,
species.
Yep.
Okay.
And when that happened, my anxiety just went through the roof. And I was like, I would almost rather be behind at this point than have a 3-way tie.
Right.
And then you had to wait like an hour for them to break for lunch or something. And
Oh
then
my goodness.
they come back.
And so you're watching like from here at home or what?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and then they went into the final round, and mine was the first one of those 3 that had tied previously, and I think I scored a 23 on the third round. They can judge a 3, 4, or 5, and then the top score wins. And I think the one right after that had a 22, and that's when it was just like, this can't be real, and there was only one left that probably has a chance, and then they got to that, and it was like a 19 or something they scored, and then it hit me like I can't believe this is real.
And then the crowd goes wild.
Yeah. Yeah, it was surreal. I mean, I couldn't breathe. I felt
really?
like, yeah.
So then you were like, I would imagine there was some sort of official notification from Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yeah, they
gave you a call.
Gave me a call right then. Yep.
Cool. So how was that? Oh, like right then?
Yeah, right. Yeah, they had to finish up. They have to go through all the entries, and then as soon as that was over, they cut the feed, and I got a phone call right away from them. So
they're like, "Were you watching?"
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. They asked. Yeah.
Nice. So how did that feel? I mean, I guess this time. This was you said 9th or 10th?
I think 10th, yeah.
And this was obviously the farthest you've gotten.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think I've been into the second round, which is usually, 60 to 100 entries will make it into the second round.
Okay.
So but to get into the final round, you actually have a shot at that point. So, it was, I don't know, it just feels like a dream come true, really.
Right.
It's just something that I've just admired for so long.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Huh. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
So what were some of your other entries, species?
Let's see, I've done ruddy ducks and cinnamon teal. I've done cinnamon teal twice, just because when I moved out here, it was the first time that I really got to see cinnamon teal.
Right.
And so they're still eligible every couple of years. No one's won with it yet.
No kidding.
I think the last time was in the 80s.
So wait, do they recycle species until somebody wins that
Yep.
species?
Yep.
Oh, interesting.
And on some years they have, if there's one species that hasn't won yet, I think in 2002 or 2001 they just had the one eligible species because they really wanted to check that box off for the program. And I think there's still the one remaining is the cackling goose.
Oh, okay.
That's the last one, and so they may do a specific contest just for that.
Just for that one, just to get that one up there.
Yeah.
So what changed, I guess, would you say? Or what do you think changed that put you above the rest this most recent go-round?
Well, so I think I entered consistently every year until, I want to say, 2017. And then that's kind of when I felt like, yeah, I'm not having much success with it. It's a dream of mine to be able to do that one day, but I thought, well, maybe, I had some other things that were, producing an income more so, and I also just, the other subject matter that I love to paint, that's a big passion of mine. So I thought, why not take a break from it and really just focus on like some of the fundamentals of artwork and composition and what's appealing to the eye. And so I took a break for 3 years and really just focused on trying to learn as much as I could. And then I came back and entered the contest in 2020. And again, I didn't do very well. I thought it was a better painting than I normally did, but then took a break again for the last 2 years and just thought, like, I just need to really figure out, because I feel like there's a level of, it's easy to get tunnel vision when you're especially painting something like a duck. It's just such a simple thing, and you don't really challenge yourself in those other ways that you might with something like a landscape. So I think that was the big thing that allowed me to progress so much from 2020, is I just focused on really like kind of like the basics of like art and painting, like what maybe.
So you made kind of a calculated retreat from the contest.
I did, yeah, yep, and
sharpen
just
your skills.
Try to work on myself in other departments, and then see if I could come back with maybe a new perspective and new ideas. And
so, how does that? I guess what does that look like? Does it mean, you know, your use of light is more on point in the painting? Is it the level of detail that is increased?
I think that's part of it. One of the main things was, I mean, it's just how your ability is to manipulate the paint without feeling like you have made a mistake or you back yourself in a corner. And so really just becoming comfortable with the paints themselves. And I also tried a couple different brands, and I moved into a really high quality brand of oil paint, which is, you know, that's something that I never really wanted to afford, just because it's, I mean, they're very expensive. One tube of paint I have, which is a cobalt color, and the cobalt blue, and it's $240 for one tube of paint.
Holy smokes.
And it makes no sense at all, but it's like things like that, you know, we do see those pigments differently, but then they also handle differently when you're trying to use them. So a big part of it was just trying to get my comfort level with how my brush interacts with the paint, and then working on like the consistency or the viscosity of the paint, like what works best for me. And so like that was a huge component.
Wow, so it was a lot of like actual technical, not necessarily artistic growth, but like technical growth.
Right. And I think that's, I mean, that's probably overlooked a lot, because that it's not hard to learn the rule of thirds and things like that. And so those are things that I tried to focus on and pay attention to more. But I mean, doesn't take very long to understand that.
Right.
But the biggest part in like a really good painting is really, I would say, just like your comfort level and how you can manipulate it, you know, in real time on the surface.
And just having that technique, you know, mastering the actual the media.
Yep. Yeah, the consistency of it, how you use it, how you layer it, things like that.
Okay, so what happens next?
So the first thing is they have 8 or 9 events that so basically I become the face of the program, I guess, as the artist for the next year. Yeah,
for the duck stamp
program.
Yep.
And so they have I think 8 or 9 different events that I'm required to go to, that I sign when I enter. So the first one is the Easton Waterfowl Festival in Maryland. So I'll be going there November 9th. And then there's things like the Junior Duck Stamp Program. They have that contest, and so I'll have to be there. The first day of sale, Ding Darling has a special event every year at their refuge. So really kind of just travel around.
So you're going on tour.
And help them promote the program, and you know, just try to educate people on everything. And then next June, they'll have the first day of sale. And then that's when I can start marketing prints and reproductions of it.
Okay, so right now you're kind of just in a waiting game before you can actually get this painting out to people who may want to hang it up on their wall.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that's all a part of signing up for the contest, is
right.
Like it's pretty strictly orchestrated when, you know, because it all falls in line with when the stamp is released.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you retain your copyright of the image.
Yep.
Right? Like commercial licensing and stuff like that.
Right.
So what, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has probably some sort of use agreement where it can go on the stamp, and then they can use it in their marketing materials and stuff.
Right. And that's when you sign the agreement entering the contest. They'll use it for the stamp and to market the stamp, and then everything else is yours to use.
Wow.
So
have you talked to any other previous winners about how winning changed their
Well,
career?
I actually have a phone call with Joe Hopman later today that we scheduled. He reached out to me, and he's the most winningest.
He's from the dynasty, the duck stamp dynasty.
Yep.
Okay.
And he won last year, actually. So
you unseated the legend.
Yeah. Well, you're ineligible for 3 years.
Oh, after you win. So. Oh, that's cool.
Right,
okay.
Right.
So so there's not one painter coming in every year and sweeping up.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm really excited to talk with him, and he seems, very generous. He reached out to me and said, let's, I'll help you and talk to you a little bit about, what I know. And
right.
So
I'd like to kind of go back to a question I had before, and I'm curious, in your mind, how you reconcile or how you maybe appreciate, it's clear that your interest in conservation started, when you set forth to, you went into conservation as a career choice, right?
Yeah.
Art ended up taking over, it seems like, but now, your art is going to be used as an instrument for one of the biggest conservation tools, in the United States. So how do you, tell me about that, how you make that, how that feels, and how maybe, is it a little ironic that the art that you maybe thought wouldn't make a difference in your life is now directly aiding in the conservation that you wanted to make a life out of?
Yeah, and I guess that was always in the back of my mind, maybe a dream, but I never thought it would actually come to fruition. Right. I mean, you're always hoping. But after I had worked restoring wetlands in Fergus Falls, that was where the Fish and Wildlife Service where I worked was Fergus Falls, Minnesota. They have a prairie wetlands learning center, and so that's the first of its kind. There's a few more now that they've expanded to, but it's a facility on a WMA, waterfowl management area, and it's integrated with the local school district. And so K through 12, and I think they just do, is it fourth and fifth graders? Fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. They'll split the students in the school district, and their first half of their year, they have half of the students have their full school days at the facility.
Oh, wow.
And
cool.
So instead of learning math, you're out on the prairie and you're using butterflies to do your math, or and so they're learning species and conservation alongside with things like math. And
oh, that's cool.
It's awesome. And so they do half that year, and they split the students. And after I worked there, I got to know all those people, and I was really interested in the duck stamp, and so one of the programs they do with the kids is the junior duck stamp program.
Okay. And
they have all the kids do an entry every year, and so after the first year after I worked there, they asked if I would come out and just spend a day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's me. If I would kind of show them what makes a good duck stamp, try to give them a jump start on their painting, and so then I've been doing that every year, I think, for 9 years now.
Oh, time is 2020. I don't think you did.
Yeah.
No, you actually did it virtually.
Right, that's right. Yeah, so that's kind of become something that I've been really passionate about, is just trying to get more kids interested in it and help them do their job, which is getting kids just interested in the outdoors, and conservation. And so that's something that I've grown a passion for and really wanted to continue with. And so now and I've always felt like I go and, I hadn't really won anything of this significance before, but I'm teaching all the kids how to do it. So now going back this year as the winner, it's going to be surreal.
Yeah.
But
you almost felt like a little bit of an imposter for a little
maybe,
while there.
Yeah.
Telling them what a real duck stamp should look like.
Right.
You don't have the belt yet.
Right,
Nice.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. It just feels like a dream come true, because that's always been what I, would like ultimately my artwork to be able to accomplish. And so now what I'd really like to do is kind of utilize this opportunity and see how I could maybe expand in that way, and do some more outreach and things.
And how do you think, there's, in the world of photos and videos flashing across people's faces every day, how do you think, art by way of painting or drawing helps a conservation message maybe more than, photos or videos?
Well, I think it's an opportunity to grab people's attention, and then it's, I guess, what you do with it, that makes all the difference. So, and that, and kind of my mission as an artist, or maybe my artist statement, has always been I I feel like I have a story to tell that could help us maybe persuade more people into understanding like the importance of our habitat and the significance of wildlife and conservation. And I just think through, maybe through the creation of many paintings, eventually I could have that story told in enough detail that it could bring more attention into things I care about.
So yeah, let's talk about your other work. Well, I guess first maybe plug where people could see your work. Do you have a website?
Yeah, I mean, if Chuck Black Art, you could find it anywhere.
Google Chuck Black Art.
Type that in, yeah.
Okay, so what are people going to see when they go there, and they take a look at your portfolio?
Yeah, so this kind of ties back into how I said I wanted to step away from the things that I'd always done and try to experiment and educate myself. So the last 5 years, I've really moved into like more simple landscapes and trying to capture things about landscapes that that told some sort of story without really maybe including too much focus on a subject matter. And so I utilizing light, I think light really kind of helps an artist do that, and it's probably why a lot of artists are really fascinated with light, because you can really tell a lot versus if it's just a cloudy day or something, it doesn't really draw your eye in certain areas or
so
certain
you mean
ways.
Like deviating from a subject by like, instead of having this mountain landscape with just this bull elk bugling like right in your face, it's maybe more about the landscape and the habitat than the subject, the elk itself. Yep,
yeah, and maybe how and even how maybe the landscape changes through the seasons, and that's I'm always really fascinated about when seasons are changing, and how do you maybe include what feels like summer with winter, and maybe intertwine fall, and using light to and so
right, because you only get one. It's just a moment,
right?
A painting is just a moment,
right?
But like you're trying to tell time,
and so I really pushed myself the last 5 years to paint from my imagination, meaning maybe I take a photo, get some reference, and come up with an idea, but then when I'm actually working the painting, just try to bend all the rules or what we think applies to nature and come up with my own light. And like with the duck stamp painting, having a light source behind the duck that really doesn't make sense for it to be there, where would it be coming from? But just things like that, to see what I could learn about how to do something or how to be better at things like that. And now I'm starting to feel maybe stagnant in that. What I really want ultimately is to figure out a way of how to tell the story of our connection with nature and like buildings and ranches and old barns and how they interact with their surroundings.
So do you paint civilization?
Yeah, and like so I used to start. That was a long time ago. I used to paint barns and farm scenes, and of course, growing up in the Midwest, that was just something I was always interested in. And so, expanding into landscapes and trying to figure out how to really come up with something unique. That has kind of given me maybe a new perspective now, and so now I'd like to go back into subject matter like barns and buildings and I guess just the human connection
where
with
humans
nature.
are in that story with nature.
Exactly. And to see what I could come up with. And so I feel like I always have an idea of, like, I know I want to move towards something in a certain direction, or I want to accomplish something, but I'm not really sure how to describe that yet. Mm-hmm. So I'm always searching for ways to help me understand that better.
Right.
And so, I did a lot of really landscape work the last few years, but now my interest in trying to incorporate, the human connection into that and see where that takes me. And so, I don't know, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So where, I mean, I guess without, giving away any of your sweet honey holes, it's pretty clear you live in the Bozeman area. Mm-hmm. what about this place, or what about parts of the state? You know, where do you draw inspiration? You know, I mean, you choose to live here for a reason. I guess I'm wondering, what about this place inspires your art?
Well, for one, when I first came out here, I thought it was going to be just very, very different from where I grew up. And,
how do you mean?
You know, like growing up, it was lush. There was dairy farms. I mean, it's beautiful country and a lot of you know, just historic looking buildings and communities. And when I came out here, I mean, that was a huge surprise. I thought it was going to be mainly sagebrush and rivers, but you get into the valleys, and I mean, it's almost no different in many ways than places like Minnesota and back home.
Right.
I mean, a lot of places in the valley here, you wouldn't be able to tell if that farm existed in Montana or Illinois.
Right. I drove by the corn plots on the way here.
Right.
Whitetail running around, you know, tree rows.
And so I feel like there was a lot of connection there that I really relate to. But then growing up in Minnesota, I feel like my freedom there of being able to get out and experience nature is so limited because they're small parcels of land, they're heavily pressured and accessed, and so just having access, it's kind of the best of both worlds around here, and it's what I really love, is because I can get all the inspiration of the subject matters, human connection with nature, that I really am passionate about and want to focus on, but then at the same time, you know, you're just a drive away from Yellowstone.
Seemingly endless wilderness.
Right.
Which is a completely different situation.
And I think I'm inspired by both a lot. My influence, or the influence that, you know, the wilderness has on me is equally as important to me as say, farm, you know, communities around it. And so I just kind of feel like it's the best of both worlds for me.
Right.
Here, yeah.
Growing up in the Midwest, did you have, like, was there, like, the allure of the West in your mind?
No, not really. I mean,
you weren't like, I'm gonna go west. No,
that really didn't happen until I was working in Theodore Roosevelt. And so when I went to school in Grand Forks, North Dakota, you know, that's much like back home, where it's, I mean, even a little flatter and less opportunity to get outside.
Yeah. I think there's a sign outside of Grand Forks that it's the highest concentration of shelter belts anywhere in the United States.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
that's because it's flat and windy.
Right. I remember I took a geology class, and one of the field days, they take you out with a spotting scope, and they look straight down the road, and you can see the water tower in the distance halfway below the horizon. And they like illustrate how flat that is, and then you go back
because you're actually seeing the roundness of the earth,
right?
Not a hill,
right? Yeah, and then you go in between and take all the measurements, and all the elevations the same, you know. And so,
wow,
it's crazy. Yeah, but I didn't even know like Western North Dakota had what it had, the Badlands and just the Western culture, and so that was all new to me when I landed my first job after college, and that's when I started to realize how much opportunity there was to explore and to be inspired by the things I love. That's when I started to really grow a love for the West. Yeah.
Any final thoughts about the whole thing? About your art? About duck stamps? Conservation? What should people take home with them about, you know, duck stamps?
Well, I think everybody should consider buying a duck stamp.
$25, right?
Yep, you can get them at all the post office locations.
Whether you're a hunter or not.
Right. I mean, it all goes towards great cause, and it's not just a hunting stamp. I would say that the thing that I've learned, especially restoring wetlands on private land, is it's one of the most practical ways that we can probably have an impact on our environment, because putting water back on the land, I mean, it's, you know, 95% of wetlands are gone now.
Right.
And that water storage on the land is so vital and so important. And a lot of what the duck stamp does is not even open to public hunting. It goes to convincing private landowners that, hey, maybe instead of corn, we could put some wild back on your land and get habitat and all these different, you know, animals and wildlife. So I'm just blessed to feel like I can be a part of this program and have the opportunity to try and promote that message and get it across. So
Right.
yeah.
The idea of what's good for migratory birds is also good for other animals.
Right.
Is also good for the earth.
for,
is also good
us
for humans.
and everything. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chuck.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Montana Untamed is a podcast from the newsrooms of Lee Enterprises Montana newspapers. Visit any of our websites or subscribe wherever podcasts are found.